Welcome to the UKOCR Community Podcast, presented by Obstacle Racing Media. Each episode, we'll be talking to race directors, elite runners, weekend warriors, and frankly, anyone else from the UKOCR scene that will talk to us. Here is your host, Alan, aka Muddy Duck.
Anywhere in Chicken South. The bloody scene is bloody south. The bloody news is bloody bad.
Greetings, friends, acquaintances, and anyone else just happens to be listening. Welcome to another edition of the UKOCR podcast with me, Alan, this week. Yes, that's me, Alan. I'm back on. Will, Becky, Chris, they're all down at Forders this weekend. I'm going to be down there filming as well, so hope to see some of you down there. But yeah, they're all down there filming at Forders. They will be back next week, I think, with a recap of the British 3K Championship. So you've got me this week. So what have I got? So if you see the description, you'll already know. But we have spoken to some of the athletes that went over to World's Toughest Mudder. So we've got a bit of a cross-section for you. And then we've got a bit of an Easter egg, so you have to wait until the end for that little bit of Easter egg. I hope your week's been going really, really well. If you haven't seen, we have got lots of things going off at UKOCR at this moment in time, so you want to get the 16th of March in your diary. Yeah, 16th of March, we are having the UKOCR Awards. More details on that coming. We've got a beautiful venue coming up, and we are organising currently with a race to put a special race on in the day. So watch this space on that. Then we've got a website launching at the end of this month. So website launching at the end of this month, which is absolutely phenomenal. We've had one for a long time, but we've not kept it updated. Due to the website not being updatable is what makes sense. It's never had all these patches put on it. Don't know what that means, but we all like a good patch in OCR, don't we? It's had all the patches put on it, so it's been such unupdatable for a while. So we've had to redesign it all, move it all over to another platform, etc., etc. And I've learnt a lot myself on how to update websites, which is going to be good. So that's coming up. And then finally, I've got my Ultra in this next weekend. Yeah, I'm going to try and run from Meriden all the way back up to my home in Barnsley. If you want to have a chance of guessing how far I'm going to go, head over to our socials, because I've put them all on socials. But basically, you pay £2, you have a guess. That's payable to PayPal, to admin@ukocr.com. And once you've done that, you put a mileage in there. And if you get the mileage that I actually cover on Strava, we're going to send you a MyZone plus half of the entry fee. The other half of the entry fees is all going to mine. So trying to raise a bit of money for mine charity, but giving something back in return to you guys. So big thank you to Dan Titcombe as well for sending me the MyZone to give away as a prize. It's much appreciated. So I guess let's get on with today's show. WTM athletes, don't forget to listen to the end as well. Listeners, I have got Andrew Cook and I have got Victoria. I'm going to say, is it Reynolds?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got the name right. That's without even looking at the sheet. World's Toughest Mudder. Welcome to the UKOCR podcast. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, recovering well, I think.
Wow. Yeah, are you still over there in sunny USA?
We are, yes. It's not quite so sunny now. We've got a storm about to hit, but we're still in Texas.
Wow.
We've got a few days out with Victoria's family, so we're making the most of it. A little bit of downtime.
Oh, fantastic. Are you from over there then, Victoria?
No, I'm from Norfolk, but my family moved over here in 1980, so they moved to Buda in Texas, and they're now in Bastrop in Texas, which is quite rural, so it's really nice.
So it's just like a home from home for you then?
Yeah.
It's like a home race. WTM was a home race for you.
No, I haven't been here for 30 years.
That's why she did so well. The penny's dropping.
Wow. So both of you covered 50 miles. Am I right saying both of you covered 50 miles?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Did we run together, or did we? Did you leave her, Andy?
I left her. We can't tolerate each other for 24 hours straight.
No.
So it was Victoria's first. I'm going to come to you first, Andy. Let's talk a little bit about your race. 50 miles. What does it say on your Strava?
Strava was just short of it. My Strava was in kilometres, so it was just short of 100 kilometres. So it was about 60 miles.
So that's a few penalties
miles.
then.
Yes, a little bit of free mileage, as we'd like to put it. Yeah.
I like that free mileage.
I didn't pay for that mileage, so it's all good.
What was the biggest penalty? What was the worst obstacle for you in terms of penalty wise?
What was it called? Hanging rough. As you came back towards the pit area, for me it was unpassable.
Right.
And the penalty just seemed very long.
And it had a river.
Very slow. As you finished, you came through a bit of a river, and then you had to find a nickel.
No, a dime in the quarters.
A dime. You had to find a dime coin in the quarters. I don't even know what a dime is, so that was tricky.
So, am I right? So is that like that's 10 cents? Is it? Is a dime 10 cents?
Yeah,
I think so.
possibly. Yes, it was the smaller coin out of all of the coins, apparently.
Right.
So that was quite quite laborious. But what was the obstacle where you threw the grappler? That was a long obstacle. That was a long penalty. That was about half a mile.
Yeah,
half a mile, a bit more probably.
Yeah.
And
is that the one where you had to go into the woods? Was the penalty into the woods?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was it?
Yeah, there was a bit of a wood and then a river and then just terrain.
Yeah, so you went down the hill, then you came back and you came up the hill.
And then you still had to do the grappler hill, didn't you?
Yeah, and you had to still go back up the hill. But I think the woods one was the other one. Hanging rough. For me, that's where I remember going through the woods and thinking, this is just never ending. This just goes on. And then all of a sudden there's a volunteer sitting in the middle of nowhere with a few buckets. And he's saying, find the coin. What coin? Wow. So it was, I didn't mind the penalties. I didn't mind them. There's been a lot of talk about all this mileage and blah, blah, blah. In my mind, we need to be better at obstacles.
Yeah.
If we're better at obstacles, we don't do so many penalties. But the obstacles did seem tough. They did seem to have stepped up quite a lot on the obstacles as well.
Yeah.
Spunky Monkey, as they called it. The first time you go up the rope to a trapeze bar, onto the monkey bars and down. I'm 51 years old. Getting up the rope and over the bar and down the monkey bars is not an easy task. So straight away I looked at it and I thought, it's not going to happen.
Wow.
So straight away it's like, okay, you just got to bite the bit, have a go. I had a couple of goes, knew I couldn't pass it, and then it's, okay, I need to take the dip, take the penalty, and just suck it up and get it done.
What was your game plan going into it? Into the whole event itself? Was you aiming for 50? Was you aiming for more? What was your my minimum is always 50. Yeah. I always want the brown bib. Get it dirty if we can. But this year was slightly different because normally I travel on my own. Normally it's my race. It's my thing. When we had COVID, when we went to Laughlin, I left poor Victoria in hospital with COVID. And it's like, I'm sorry, babe, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to run around the desert for 24 hours. So it's normally my baby. It's my thing. This year, Victoria signed up and it was her first. And your goal was, basically Victoria's goal was my goal. Right.
So Victoria wanted 50 miles. So I wanted to make sure she got 50 miles. My race finished after 20 hours, about 20 hours, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
On lap 10, I've been feeling sick for a couple of laps. I don't know if it's heat or what it was, but I was sick. I was out on course. I was vomiting. I dragged my backside back to the finishing line. Got the lap done. I've got the brown bib. My goal was done. I felt like, okay, I've achieved what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
I'm happy. So then instantly my goals changed. Instantly my goals went to Victoria, to making sure. Carry on, I'm getting a bit emotional.
Back in. Deep breaths.
Yeah, so that was suddenly my goal was making sure she gets to the 50. So,
and what lap was Victoria on at this point? So when you were at your 50, what lap was you on, Victoria?
I think I might have just finished or maybe between 9 and 10, somewhere towards there.
You was out on 9. You was out on 9 because I went back to the pits.
I started 9 at 22 hours. 21 and a half roughly, because I did lap 10 in about 3 hours, didn't I?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I finished at 25 hours, so 22 hours. So yeah, I think I was on between lap 8 and 9, towards the end of 8, something like that. I don't know, because we hadn't seen each other, had we? We saw each other early on at Grappler, and then we hadn't seen each other at all for the whole 24 hours. We saw each other, I think it was at lap 3. You were doing lap 3, and I was on lap 2 maybe, because I was on the Grappler hill trying to get Grappler done.
No, yeah.
And that was the only time we'd seen each other for the whole race.
4 and 3.
Yeah, it must have been because
it was great. I didn't see her. It was fantastic.
Why? And took that responsibility away. At least he didn't have to stop and help me at any point.
So did you realise, Victoria, how close you were to the actual cut-off time?
Yeah, because I wasn't going to do lap 10. I wanted 50, and I went out there to do 50. And at lap 7, lap 5 and lap 8, my head torch just didn't work.
Right.
Torch stopped working at Devil's Beard, so I did almost the whole of lap 8 with no light, and it was horrendous. I swear to God, I just didn't want to be there anymore. It was awful, and I couldn't see the ground when there was a fog light shining. I couldn't see the ground at all, so I had to just move really carefully so not to get injured. And then I got back to the pit, and Lisa, my coach, my pit crew, she was saying, I don't think you're going to get it done. She said, if you push hard you can, but with your last time you're not going to get it done. But I said, because I couldn't see anything, I said, if I get some light, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And she said, well, you're going to have to push really hard. And I was thinking, I don't know if I can. And then I thought, if I do lap 9 and I've got 3 hours and 15 minutes to go, I can do it. So I just pushed as hard as I could. And then lap 10, I had about 3 hours 20 to go. And I thought, I'm just going to have to go for it and just get it done. So I did. And at the coach's corner was the worst obstacle for me, because it was so scary, that cargo net.
Yeah. Because
it was so slippery and you couldn't see in there. For there were a few laps that we did where the fog was so heavy in there and it was dark. You couldn't see anything, and it was terrifying because it was so slippery and it went straight up and straight down, like straight down to the ground. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing to hold on to apart from the rope, and it was just so slippery. But I got over coach's corner for the 10th lap. Got round the corner, down the hill, and then he was stood at the bottom of the hill waiting for me. And that was when I knew I could actually do it, because I knew that he would make me get to the end. So that was a moment. That was intense.
That was, for me, that was a moment. That was my race summed up in that moment. When I saw her come down the hill from coach's corner, I looked at the watch. We got 1 hour left to do 1 mile, 5 obstacles.
Yeah.
I knew we were almost touching that brown bib for Victoria, and this year that was my race. Wow. That was the defining moment for me. I was emotional. I was actually, when she came running up,
music at that point.
I was. You could see, you could taste colours at that moment, couldn't you?
Yeah.
But she was running down the hill, and I saw her. I was emotional. I was actually sobbing. Because the emotional overload.
Yeah.
Victoria come running up and she just pointed at me. She goes, "Don't you dare cry! Don't you dare! I'm doing okay. Don't you dare cry!" And then she just almost glided past and just carried on. It was a wonderful moment, and that's when I knew she was broken. Clearly, she was very broken, but strong physically. She was still. The head was there. It was there to get the job done, and that was my race. That honestly was.
Was this your? I know, Victoria, this was your first World's Toughest Mudder, but had you run through the night before over obstacles?
I've done ETM twice.
Right.
And we did an ultra marathon in Norfolk in December last year.
Right.
So we went from Clyde next to sea to Great Yarmouth.
It was in December.
That was
through the night.
That was my longest ever run. And before that, I'd only ever done London Marathon, but that was back in 2011. So I'd done 2 ETMs this year and last year, but I've never done anything with so much endurance in it. No, never.
Did the ETM give you a little bit of what to expect? Was you a little bit prepared, or was it no, I'm not? This was like completely different level.
No, this is different level. I don't know what it is. Whether it's the amount of travel that you have to do and the preparation, the money, all the sacrifice and the training that everyone else has to do in the background. So like the amount of support you have to get to this point or to that point on the start line, because it's such a lot to do, and work and children and everything. That ETM is just a weekend again. It's not just a weekend. I don't mean to play down ETM, but this is massive. This was a massive deal, and but the event itself, that level of endurance, that amount of time, and those obstacles. Because I could normally do like tipping point. Could normally do at least half of Funky Monkey, but I tipping point I tried twice and I couldn't get over it anymore. Hanging rough I tried once. There's just no point because I couldn't rip onto anything there at all. Everest is way harder. Everest is way harder here than it was ever in England.
Yeah. In what way?
And then the penalty loops. I did 65.6 miles.
Wow.
And that was huge. But the thing is, I did 65.6 miles. I'm like, I did 65 miles. It's just insane that I did that. And I never thought I would ever be able to do that in my life, ever. So
why was Everest tougher over there than in the UK? Because people will be asking me that.
It's just bigger.
Yeah.
Really way slippery.
It's bigger.
It was covered in mud. And even though you've got the angels at the top, it's just hard. Harder. And you haven't got that. You haven't got that when you're pushing so hard. You just haven't got that strength in your legs. I didn't have. I didn't have that strength in my legs at all to get to the top.
The obstacle is physically bigger, it's physically steeper.
Yeah.
As you're going up, we've almost got that circular movement. Theirs just goes almost straight up in the air.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've got to hit it hard. You have got the angels up there who they're amazing. The guys who give up their race to be your race.
Yeah.
As such, they're up there all night long, just hanging their arm down, getting people over.
But even Matterhorn, getting up Matterhorn, even though you've got the angels at the bottom, it's a lot taller to get to the ledge before you can get onto the cargo net. And the cargo nets are even harder because they're all such rough rope.
Right.
Yeah, if I didn't have my bleg mitts, I wouldn't have finished the race.
Right.
My hands were torn to pieces. I had splinters in my hands from hammering in the stakes on the penalty on hanging just the tip. It's brutal. And I know other courses have been more brutal, but this was my first one, and I'm saying it's brutal.
But I think, going back to it's everything what goes with it. It's the travel. So you're fatigued from traveling. You've got the time difference.
Yeah.
Naturally, as Brits, I don't give myself enough time to adjust the time clock when I'm out there. So my natural time clock is 1 o'clock in the morning out there. Here I'm waking up. Well, if you're racing at 12 o'clock, you're awake 11 hours before you race.
Yeah.
And then you've got to go and race 24 hours. Mm. So it's sort of like with ETM, you can rest until 4 o'clock, get your stuff together, go to the race, rest again. So you're well rested before you start. That don't seem to happen quite so well out here. And the obstacles are harder. They're what we think is harder in England. Yeah. Pump that full of juice, and then you've got worlds.
Yeah. Also, we were picking cactus spines out of our shoes and out of our feet still, like just a couple of days ago. There was some guys had to help me to take some out of my shoes because they were digging into my feet as I was running along these rocks. And they were huge. They were like, where am I? There. But there was that, massive.
Like 2 inches long then, so that's quite big, that, isn't it? That's
Yeah. And then you're running in rattlesnake country as well, and you're in the middle of the night going through a river with no head torch, thinking, oh my god, what is that?
Before I let you go, because I don't want to call you time, because I know you're out there and you're enjoying yourselves and that. Who was your pit crew?
We had my cousin Gina and my cousin Carly who drove over from here, which is about 3 hours. My little girl who's 7, Ellen, and then they went home, and Lisa and Carl from Different Breed, they're our coaches, they took over overnight.
Awesome. Well done.
Yeah.
Fantastic, guys. Well done to us. Before I let you go, you can give a shout out to anyone you want. I know you just mentioned your coaches there. Give a shout out to whoever you want.
We've got Wayne Fountain. He's sports massage from Gayton, and Different Breed, Lisa and Carl.
Josh Kagawa, I love you, man. I love you. I met him in Atlanta 2018 when the chips were down, when it was cold.
Yeah.
And he lives out in America. He's my best friend. Yeah. We still have this amazing bond, and we do. When I saw him on the Saturday before the race, he didn't get there until the Saturday. We were like having these massive speed hugs. It was great. It was a moment. He's a gentleman, a true gentleman. So hello, Josh.
And then all the volunteers, especially the people who got us over Dublin Walls all night and up Matterhorn. Awesome people. Yeah.
All the guys who give the race up to help other people. Amazing.
Fantastic, guys. Have a great time out there. Sorry?
And lots of other people. All the rest of the lunatics. Yeah. Anybody else who knows me, as they might say on the radio.
I've just left 2 World Toughing Race. I've got 2 more coming on now. Leanne Simmonds and Gary, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, not bad.
I'm more excited than you two are. Is this jet lag that you've just flown all the way back over here? Because I'm super excited to have you on.
It's good to be here. It's been a while, so it's thank you for the invite back. It's very, very nice of you.
First time for me, so I'm a bit like, oh, what's going on here? So.
Let's go to you first, Leanne. First British lady. Mileage-wise, happy with it?
Am I happy with my mileage?
75, was it?
So I got 55.
55, sorry.
55 this time for the official mileage. My actual mileage was definitely closer to 70. But 55, not necessarily what I wanted, but it could have been a lot worse. I finished, and it's a decent mileage for the course. So I'll take it.
I mean, you finished in 22:58. Did you not fancy going back out for that last one to get that extra 5?
So I would have loved to have gone back out. I felt like I had it in me to go back out, but the time it was taking me at that point to complete my laps, I would not have finished another lap in the time that I had left. So I made the sensible decision.
Yeah, I get that. Well, looking at your pit times earlier on, your pit times are super fast. When I look at everyone else's, you were like, I think your longest pit time was 7 minutes at lap 6. I'm going to assume that's to put the wetsuit on and things like 8 minutes at lap 7, sorry. So 6 and 7 were pit time wise. But other than that, you was really, really well.
So pit times are something, and I know Gary will agree with me on this, that we both very much been trying to work on over the last couple of years. We know full well that the least amount of time you are in the pit at Worlds, the better your race is going to be. Spend it out on course. Both of us have been really, really lucky this year to be working with an incredible coach who very kindly came out and pitted for us. So she knows her stuff, and she knows what we need to do. I'm really sorry, the small child is calling me. Despite the fact that she's meant to be asleep and that I've told her I can't go back up, so I may just have to disappear a second. But I'll let Gary kind of take over from this. I'm so sorry.
This is what happens on real life podcasts in this. People don't get this sometimes.
You can't make it up, can you? You can't make it up. It's the way it goes.
What was the pit? What was the name? Who was the pit crew for you?
So we've both been working with a coach called Lisa Smith. She's part of. She's made Different Breed. So there's a few of us out there of her athletes, including Cookie and Vic, who I think you said you had on before.
Yep.
So she was out there and she was pitting for us. And both me and Leanne have been working massively on reducing those pit times. You don't want to be in the pit. You want to be out there. You want to be on course. And that's what it's all about, I think.
I mean, your pit times are just good, except 10 and 11, 10 and 11, 12 minutes. I mean, was we having a nap?
No, that was changing. So one of them was changing into my wetsuit, right. Which we suddenly found out was too baggy at the bottom and too tight at the top. So it was a bit of a struggle to get me in there. So eventually we got in there. And then on the 11th lap, I needed some hot food. First time ever on a long overnight endurance event, I've needed hot food or wanted hot food, but I just had that craving. So I had to get some porridge in me.
At what point in lap 10 did you know you wanted hot food? Because I get this. Yeah, I get this. I'm out running, I'm doing, you're doing a long distance run. And I mean, my ultras tend to be over the fells. So you've got 10 miles to the next checkpoint. But it's a similar distance, it's 2 hours, and this is what you were running those laps at that time. At what point did you realise that I needed hot food? Because it always gets me first 10 minutes when I've left checkpoint.
It was about half an hour into the lap. Yeah. And then I just had this massive craving for porridge. And I'd actually said the day before, because Lisa was sort of saying, oh, what about hot food? And I said, I won't have hot food. I don't do hot food. And I just had this massive craving for porridge. And I just couldn't get it out of my head. I was just like, I need porridge. I want porridge. And as soon as it's in my head, I just couldn't get it out of it. So,
you covered the first 9 laps. So 45 miles, 11 hours, 31. The night's hitting, it's getting dark, the temperature's dropping. You ran them fairly fast. I'll go through a few of your lap times here. I've got lap 1, 44 minutes, lap 2, 49, lap 3, 55. Lap 4, 59 minutes, all under an hour before we started getting over the hour mark. We're talking about super high temperatures over there. How did that affect? Did it affect you?
I was quite surprised. I was quite worried actually going into it, thinking about the temperature was really going to affect me. I'm not great running in the heat, but I just kept going, kept making sure I was hydrating, kept taking some salts, and I seemed to perform quite well. I was really, really proud of myself on that because, as I say, I was really concerned. And Leane will say, as soon as we saw the temperatures creeping up towards the day, I was like, what's going on? It needs to be cold. It needs to be, raining or something I'm used to. So, instead of panicking too much, I tried to take it as a challenge and just push myself out there in the heat. And it paid off on them. And definitely on the first 6 laps, it paid off.
I'm going to assume with them times as well, not many obstacles, failures in them first 6 laps for you.
No, I mean, with them gradually opening, that's a benefit for the first few laps. And as they did start opening, I was all right. I didn't get too many failures. I don't think I got any failures in the first few laps, actually.
Yeah. When did the failures start to come in?
I think my first one was actually lap 7 because I wasn't eating enough. And then I did start to feel a bit, I need to get some food in me. And that's the thing. I think a byproduct of the heat, I wasn't hungry, even though I should have been taking on the nutrition. So I think what did I feel? Funky? Was it Funky? I don't know if Funky was open by then, but I think that was the first failure when I got onto that.
Right, and you can see that in your time. You're saying lap 7, 26 minutes slower than lap 6. It starts the laps do start to change them, but you actually came back at the end as well. Lap 13, 14, sunrise. Started putting a few fast laps in again. What was it like through the night? Or was it tough through the night on those obstacles?
It was. It wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, parts of it, as I'm sure you get to parts of the courses where it usually goes really, really quiet, and you're out there on your own. And it didn't really get that this year. There was at least a couple of people about every now and then. But towards maybe 2-3 o'clock, some of the obstacles started getting a bit wetter. They got a bit more difficult. Especially on, and I cannot remember any of the changed names that they used, but what is usually just the tip.
Yeah.
They sort of made some changes to that one. I think it was swinging tips or something it was called. And that got really, really wet. And around about 2-3 o'clock was my first failure on that. Thankfully, it was the only one on that. I managed to get over it the rest of the time. But Funky was just really difficult. I really struggled with Funky this year. And they really changed that up. And I think the bars were very different, just very wet. And it was quite difficult to get over that one.
Wow. Did you realise how well you were doing?
No. I mean, I knew where I was. I knew what lap I was on.
Yeah.
But when I sort of start running and get on course, I just get into my own head and I just go and I just concentrate on a lap at a time. Until I got to like 13, 14, then I was like, I'm going home here with a silver bib. I've got to get the 75. And I got more into my head and just kept going. I think I ran into Leane at one point and I couldn't speak to her. She was like talking to me and I was just like, oh, go in.
Leane's back now. Let's ask Leane about that point. Leane, what's it like being ignored?
He didn't completely ignore me. I got like some kind of hand signal, and I was genuinely at that point. I was a little bit worried because I didn't know exactly where he was, which lap he was on, and I didn't know whether he was doing that because he was really struggling, or whether it's because he was just in the zone and needed to go. And then we saw each other very, very briefly as I went onto a penalty as he was coming off. And there was a little bit of banter there, and I was like, no, that's fine. I know he's okay. He just needs to crack on, and that's fine. So I was like, okay, that's good. And I think it was my last lap as well. So when I was able to get back into the pit, I was able to kind of get a proper update on where he was, and I kept doing that throughout the night. I was like, oh, how's Gary getting on? Where is he? Blah 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 blah. And with the other guys as well, because for me, these events. Yes, it's as much about what I can do personally, but the thing I love most, it sounds really, I don't know, trite, but is seeing how the people that I care about are getting on as well. And, obviously Gary's one of my best friends. We've road tripped quite often. We do events a lot together, and he's had such an incredible year. It was such a big thing for me to see him hit his goals. And also the same for people like Victoria. It was her first Worlds, and I know how hard she's worked this season towards that. I know how difficult training can be for her time-wise, in the same way that it can be for me, as a parent. And I'd seen her earlier on in the night when it was dark and it was cold, and, it really hits you the most. And I knew at that point that she'd been, she was kind of feeling, she was struggling. She was feeling like that she must have been slower than everybody and failing more obstacles than everybody. And I was like, we are all in exactly the same boat.
Yeah. I think I am.
Sorry.
No.
And so, to kind of then see them go on and achieve and crossing the finish line, both with Gary and Victoria, was just amazing. I love it.
Sorry to interrupt there. I just wanted to shout out to Victoria as well, because she did awesome. I saw her a couple of times throughout the night, and I was running up towards her, saying like, come on, you can do this. And I shouted, I'm sure she won't mind me saying this. I shouted, well, what lap are you on? And she went, I'm only on 8. And I said, excuse me. She said, I'm only on 8. And I said, excuse me. And she went, I'm on 8. I said, that's it. You're on 8. Keep going. Yeah. And she went, thanks. And off again. I went and I saw her again on the next lap. And she did absolutely brilliantly. Absolutely phenomenal. She's done excellent work this year.
Amazing. Yeah. I've spoke to like literally 10 minutes before you guys, and she was over the moon. 50 miles, officially 50 miles, 65 on Strava, but officially 50 miles on the thing. Absolutely amazing. Leane, I'm just going to come to you a second, because you've been to so many WTMs and things like that. What was this course like over there compared to other ones?
Okay, so this is the third one that I've run, so I can only really talk about the 3 that I've done. I've done Atlanta the first year, Pensacola / Alabama last year, and obviously this one. I think the biggest difference is how open this course was. There was a lot of wooded areas in the other 2 courses. There was a lot more hills as well, I would say, in Atlanta than there was. There were some particularly gritty hills, which I just remember being a solid trudge. Although there were some on this course, they were very much more of a short and steep, and then it's over. The advantage of the more exposed course is you get these great moments where you just look over and you can just see these headlamps just littered, or you can see the obstacles. Like there was this point maybe a third of the way into the lap that you could look across and you'd just see Mudderhorn, and you were like, I know that's where I'm going to, but I know I've got a distance to get there. So, and you could kind of pick certain points and be like, I know that's where I'm heading to next. I think we were quite lucky that it wasn't more windy, because I think that venue, had that wind picked up, it could have been very, very dusty and very, very windy. And that would have made it an even more grueling course than I think it has been previously. I think the terrain for this was probably fairly easy, but to some degree that makes it potentially almost more mundane because it's so samey.
Yeah. Rather
than there being like, you're in this area now and then you're going to that area and then you've got the wind tunnel that we had near the end last year. So I think, there's swings and roundabouts. Obviously, the biggest difference between the courses was penalties. The penalties this time round were far more about the distance and the time that takes and adds to your race, which I think is why the overall mileage was just lower over the board for everyone, mainly.
How many dimes did you have to go and get?
The dimes were a lot easier than I was expecting, to be fair. Yeah. I had to take that. I didn't get across that obstacle. The point that I first got to it was absolutely soaking wet, and there was just no way that I was going to get across. Something for me, which is quite unusual and has something I very much have reflected on since, that I struggled with this race is, whereas normally I will always give obstacles a proper go every lap, irrespective of how I've done before. I'll still give them a go. And in the past, I've got over stuff further on that I maybe failed previously. And for whatever reason, one of the things for me this race, I didn't do that. And I got to a point where I was just like, no, that's being done. And certainly the obstacle, like Gary, I'm having a bit of a blank, but hanging rough, certainly for me, that was an obstacle that I saved up some of my bands on my last lap, so I had 4 bands that I could do bypasses on, and that was absolutely one that I was happy to use the bypass band on. Not least because it wasn't getting the dime was the easy bit, but the second half of that loop back just took you through this kind of swampy, rivery trail, and it was just exhausting and soul sapping.
Yeah, you couldn't build up any speed on that one, whereas some of the other penalties you probably could. I only did that penalty once, but you couldn't build up any speed on it.
Yeah, it just got really slippy as well. So
we did have to do some research the night before just to double check though what a nickel actually was.
Yeah. And despite doing that, I still had to check when I got to it whether I was looking for the smaller one or the bigger one. But it was much easier to find that than I expected it to be.
Yeah, I think when I read the rule book, I thought they was going to give you some type of code. And I was thinking, it looked like about half a mile there and half a mile back when I saw the map. And I'm thinking, if you've got to run half a mile with a code in your head, that's going to be absolutely so energy sapping, because you got back and you quite easily forget a code in 5-10 minutes. And I was thinking, but then I heard it was dimes and nickels, and I was thinking that's a little bit better.
So I think what was quite interesting with a lot of the penalties, and I did a lot of them, I think my obstacle completion on this particular course was less than it has been on previous ones. And the rule book made the penalties sound a lot worse than they were in terms of that technical bit.
Yeah.
An example of that was for one of the penalties in the rule book, it had said you'd have to weigh out a certain amount of material in a bucket and run round and then weigh the bucket in at the end. And if your bucket was incorrect, you'd have to add to it and run it again. And you couldn't leave until that weight was correct. That's not what it ended up being, whether it was meant to or not. It just ended up being you fill the bucket to the top with sand, and the volunteer wouldn't let you go until they were happy with the level it was filled. And then you ran around and you got it out at the end. But so that was a lot easier than anticipated, because it didn't involve that mind play. But that's what Worlds does, isn't it? So much of it is about the mind play and those mind games and you worrying about what you might have to do compared to the reality of it.
Without a doubt. That is what WTM does. It's the night time, it's the cold, it's the wet, it's the rain and things like that. Gary, what did you think about the amount of water on course? especially in the dead of night, because my sources tell me that there was a fair bit of water out there that was very, very cold.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of water. I was mentioning this to Leane on the flight back yesterday or the day before. I've lost track of time. I don't know. That the first half seemed to be pretty much dry, and then it went very wet after then. Whether it was falling in an obstacle because you couldn't complete it, or it was a bit more wet because then you had gloop, you had melting point, you had cage crawl, you had the mashup of trench warfare and sewer act. So it did get very wet towards the end. However, there wasn't a full submersion at all. Submersion? I can't even speak. Yeah, so that was quite surprising. And I think I actually missed that. I know that sounds really daft to say. I know, but I missed a full, Arctic dunk. It's one of my favourite obstacles. I missed it. So
I agree. And I didn't actually think there definitely wasn't as much water as I was expecting. And I felt like it was, maybe my memory of it is wrong, but I felt like it was a drier course than some of the ones I've done previously. But both of the worlds I've done previously, there have been several full submersions on course. Yeah. Arctic is always one of them, and there's normally there's been some kind of underwater tunnels or something like the stacks where you've got a high jump into a full submersion of water, whereas there just wasn't. And you could be very careful if you knew that you were going to be failing that obstacle and therefore going in the water anyway. You could control how much you went in by getting in rather than trying it, so therefore your submersion wasn't as deep as if you'd fallen, because you've controlled it, which makes it much easier to deal with.
So melting point was, the whole idea with melting point was warm water to cold water, which would have been Everest. So there was no dump. So when you came down because it's a bit of tipping point. Am I right in thinking it was tipping point into Everest? No, into Arctic Enema, sorry. Into Arctic Enema, but there was no dunk in the Arctic Enema side then, no?
No, it went up to maybe at one point your chin, if depending on how you got out of the tube, but no more than that. Your hands got a bit wet, a bit cold, but not. It
was entirely possible to do the obstacle and control that. I mean, I guess it depends how you come out of that tube. For me, with tipping point, I will crawl up until the point I start to tip, and then I almost brace against the edges whilst the tip comes in, and then control my coming out. And by doing that, you could absolutely just go out. And it was quite refreshing, to be honest, especially those first laps.
Yeah.
I've never been so excited to see cage crawl open. Normally, if I was running up to an obstacle at Wells and it's about to open, I am getting past there as quick as I can, if possible. With cage crawl, I'd have been like, I'm just going to chill and, give myself 5 minutes so I can go and get cold, because I really struggled with the heat. There were a number of other reasons for that as well. But I would have been more than happy to see more water on the course than we did.
Yeah, I think though towards the end, especially where, as I say, the second half was more water based, it caused personally for me a few issues getting over Funky, because I could never get my hands dry again, and then the same for hanging rough. Because that was straight after Augustus, which I've got to say, I love the American version of Augustus. It's brilliant.
Cool.
It's exhausting, but it's brilliant.
So this is a net that goes up, a circular net that you go up, and the water comes down, and it's a freestanding net. It's a free hanging net, so it's not braced against anything, which makes it even tougher. Am I right in saying that?
Exactly, and you've got to work the best way you can. There is, I think, a way to do it, which I think by lap 10 I'd figured it out, but it's a really good obstacle, I think, and quite challenging, especially into the night.
Are you going to give us the tip if it comes over then? You're going to give us the tip, Gary, if it's going to come over. I'm going to assume it's going to be one strand.
It's definitely, it's different for everybody, and I think Leane actually does it different to me. But what I found is if you actually do it on the sides and you sort of one foot on the side, next foot up, and go up, sort of like a bit like a Spider-Man.
Wow. So we both first experienced this when we went over for, was it Twin Cities or was it Chicago?
Twin Cities.
Twin Cities, the toughest.
Yeah.
And it was exhausting. Like I got to the point where I was having to stop and rest part way up. It was absolutely energy sapping. Whereas at Worlds, I found it easier, possibly partly because I've done it before. I absolutely agree with Gary about the technique. I think we were really, really fortunate. The volunteer that was on it is incredible. I think it was Sandy?
Yeah, Sandy.
Yeah. She is incredible. She is. I have to say, some of the volunteers I've experienced out in Worlds are just, and in the States, are just so far beyond. The level of commitment they have is just amazing. And she was there on it every lap, but she also was really good at giving people pointers. And I, like Gary, for me, I found kind of wide stance with your feet is the best way. And yeah, step on one to get your foot up as high as you can, and then step and put all your weight on it. And then put your other foot up as high as you can, and then step and transfer all that weight on it. So it's almost like stepping stones rather than climbing a net, if that makes sense.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. What obstacle would you both want to bring over to the UK that was over there?
I really liked the little twist they did on Just the Tip. I've really struggled with Just the Tip in the UK for some reason this year. At the start of the year, I clicked it towards the end of it. But I really liked the whole thing being freely swinging. And I thought that actually just made a bit more of a challenge, but also you were able to work it with you. I really liked that one.
Which is interesting because I had the completely opposite experience with it. So Just the Tip is one of the obstacles that I've done really well on this year in the UK. I very much do it by technique as opposed to upper body strength. And I found when you transferred from the wooden bits to the round handles, I just completely lost my flow, and it was really hard to get back into it again. So I found that really frustrating. Gloop would be their version of Gloop. I'd love to see that over here. It makes it just that much. Yeah, I just think it works so well, and it's such a great obstacle without being overcomplicated.
Yeah, I get that. Lovely, guys. Guys, thank you for joining me. Before I let you go, shout outs. Who was your pit crew, first of all? Who was your pit crew? I know you mentioned that your coach went over. Was it anyone else over there with you pitting?
So we had Lisa and her husband Carl were looking after us, and as I say, they were amazing. And I've got to give a shout out, if Gary hasn't done it whilst I disappeared, to Lisa and her company Different Breeds. She just gets it, she knows it, and the support you get from her is just phenomenal. And yeah, her and Carl did a brilliant job. They had 6 of us to look after in 3 different locations, and they did a fantastic job.
They did. Yeah, great stuff.
Any other shout outs you want to give while we're on here? You shout to whoever you want, friends, family, suppliers of anyone. Fire away.
I just want to say a big thanks to all the volunteers over there in Worlds, because like Leanne said, they were absolutely brilliant. Sandy, AJ, the Joe and everybody on the Berlin walls, the Everest guys, they just did phenomenal jobs.
Yeah, I'd second that. The volunteers, but also those runners that, give up their races to help other people. The ones we always hear about are the Everest Angels. Francis and his team are incredible. And then you also had, as Gary just mentioned, an American guy called Joe Herman, who spent all night with a couple of others at the walls, Berlin walls, and they literally all night were just throwing people up, to the point that people were queuing to use them to get up over the wall rather than trying to do it themselves. And again, up on Mudderhorn, you had David Didier and a bunch of others as well, who they're just incredible. And again, that's something we just don't really see to the same extent over here. So many people wouldn't have hit their goals without them.
No, they did an absolutely amazing job. And as Leanne said, they gave up their race, and that's what they want to do. But they help so many people. That's, it's fantastic.
Awesome. Will I see you both at ETM this year?
Always. Yeah. One capacity or another will always be there.
And have you booked the flights to Florida yet?
I booked my ticket.
You booked your ticket?
I booked my ticket. Not the flights yet, but I've booked my ticket.
Awesome.
Well, I haven't, but that's only because I I am waiting for a season pass code to be sent through to me from this year's Holy Grail so that I can book mine up.
Excellent. Guys, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always. I will see you all at ETM.
Apologies for having to disappear for half of it.
Top British athlete at recent World WTM. Grant Thompson, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Back from the jet lag. Have we got any jet lag, or are we all right?
Jet lag was a bit wary, but I actually caught a bag after the race, it would seem. So, I've been sort of running back and forth at the toilet.
Oh, no.
Which wasn't the best experience coming home. And, when first trip to America and when you're trying to fly home as well, that was probably a bigger obstacle than the actual race itself. But feeling a lot better now is that I've had a good night's rest.
Wow. Well, do you think it was a bug, or do you think it was potentially the heat? Because I'm hearing rumours about the heat. Was that hot out there?
Yeah, it was hot.
To people?
Well, it could be, but when we're on the ranch, there was a lot of shit on the ground, and just all that bodily fluids constantly going in and out of that water. So I think it was just a bad combination. The heat ran down, dehydration. Could be a variety of things, but I think it was just a bag, nothing too major to worry about. So, because I seem to be over the worst of it now. Awesome.
Not bit by no rattlesnakes or anything like that?
No. Any rattlesnakes, I would just punch them, batter them.
That's probably the only picture I never saw this weekend. No one, because when it was over in Pensacola last year, we was getting pictures of rattlesnakes and that,
right.
and no one's posted a picture of a rattlesnake this time round.
No, I didn't see any anyway.
No, that's a shame. Well, it's not a shame, it's a good thing. So, top British athlete. I was watching the stats, I was watching the race, on YouTube, and I was watching the positions and everything else, and you seem to be always like, you was up there, you was always in the top 20. Did you go out there with a goal of getting into top 10 or top 20 or anything? What was your goal?
Well, not sort of really in my head, because I've never done this before. This is my first time ever doing it. And sort of in my head, I was just sort of like, a top 10 would sort of be a dream result. But I didn't really try and focus on a position. I was just trying to focus more on mileage. So I was like, just try and run for as many miles as I possibly could. But obviously, when you're coming past the line, you can check where you are on the leaderboard. So it was kind of hard not to check. I told myself I wasn't going to check, and then it was kind of hard not to go, I'll have a wee peek. And then, I noticed for a lot of the time I was sort of in that sort of top 10, and then a few times I dropped right down but then I must have sort of crawled back in. So didn't really aim for a place. It was more just sort of mileage I was trying to go for.
At what point did you know you were doing well?
Probably when I went after I had a long pit break. I think it was lap 14. I was really struggling with cramp most of the race, but I was really struggling. I had to basically walk a whole lap. So I came into the pit and I was like, I've got to just lie down, get a bit of a rest, get off my legs, because I just needed to put my feet up. And then I think I was in the pit for about an hour 17. I didn't think it was that long, but then so got myself back up, went back out for another lap, and then when I came back in and checked, I realised I sort of actually managed to climb back into the sort of top ranks again. And then that's when I sort of was like, right, if I can keep going at this sort of pace, get another few laps in, then I should be good. So that's when I sort of realised that I could maybe do well or get a result.
I was going to ask you about that, because I did see that lap 14 was your slowest lap then at 1:55, and then you went in the pits for an hour 17, and it was I mean, you came back out on a 1:31, so it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Well, in that 1:55 lap, I felt like that took hours. I felt like that I was out there for a good few hours. I didn't realise it was only 1:55, because in my head I was just slowly trudging along. So I obviously was a bit quicker than I thought, but it was probably just the tiredness. But the pit stop, I think I needed it. So yeah.
Do you have a pit crew with you, or did you go solo?
I went solo, but I met a bunch of Scottish lads that I managed to tag along with and stay with them. So they ended up only being 20 yards away from me. But for the most part, I didn't really see them. I think they kept trying to catch me coming in, but I was usually just sort of in and out and then off again. So I think it was a good 10 hours before one of the guys, Martin Gemmell, came over, and he's like, I finally caught you. And he was sort of speaking to me. So by the end of the race, they were certainly coming over and trying to make sure I was okay and how I was doing and all that. So, but for the most part, I was just my own little tent, no real game plan, just see how I get on, you know.
Yeah, and it doesn't show when you normally when you see a solo runner at WTM or ETM or any endurance event like that, you tend to see that their pit times tend to be round about 4 to 5 minutes. I
Yeah,
can see for your first 6 pits, you know, well, your first 5 were under 1:30, and then you hit a 2 minute 40, and then you went to 9, 8 minutes 13. That reflects that it was more of a solo run. Was it at
yeah,
them points that you was like trying to get the nutrition in and things like
I think
that?
so. Yeah, so a few times it was just trying to make sure I take on like food because I'm never much of an eater, so I struggle to eat like during the race. So it tends to be just like sort of gels and protein bars. But there's a few times I was consciously trying to eat like something just to
Yeah.
get in my system. But a lot of times as well, I was just sort of I was suffering from cramp very quickly in the race. So a few times I was just trying to massage the calves and just take an actual sort of longer break just to sort of rest. But
Do you normally suffer from cramps, or was it
no,
dehydration?
but yeah, this was weird. When I first was just doing it fun run and first started running a few years ago,
Yeah.
yeah. But not now that I've finally got sort of like miles and I actually ran and train and stuff. But for some bizarre reason, I don't know why, about 2.5 hours into that race, bang, cramp, just really badly, horrifically in my calves. And that was there with me for the rest of the race. So every step, it felt like one of my calves was about to pop. And a lot of people were saying it's probably the heat, dehydration, but for only 2.5 hours into the race, when it was just sort of running and not even like fast running the first sort of 2, 3 laps, yeah, it was just a strange one to be dealing with cramp that quickly in a race.
I suffer from cramps. I'm not one to give advice because I've never done this distance that you've
Yeah.
done. I go for runs and
Oh
things
no,
like that.
all advice taken.
But Linda Johnson and Katie Joyce, when I would explain to them, when I got to, it was always at 35 miles, 40 miles, the cramps always hit me. And they told me to buy, they're called salt sticks, the chewable salt tablets.
I've got all that.
Yeah.
So I had my salt hydration, my game, electrolytes. So I don't know, maybe it was just like a combination of tight calves as well. Maybe I was just needing to loose them off. But yeah, I've got all my salt stick powder, my capsule. So I literally took out a bottle, like a 500 milliliter bottle with me and just carried it with me every lap and filled it up. So I'm a bit confused as why it happened.
What did you think to the obstacles at WTM?
I mean, well, for me, first experience, I enjoyed them, and I prefer sort of grip strength stuff. That's my sort of first I like that. I enjoy that. So yeah, I enjoyed them. So as I said, I've not been able to compare it to previous years. I know there's a lot of talk of people. Some people were happy, some people weren't. But for me, for the most part, because it was all a new experience in terms of world stuff, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed them.
Cool. What about penalties for you? Did we get any penalties, or did
It took
you
me
have a clean race?
I think we all got penalties in this one. So it took me till about 11, half 11 at night before I got my first penalty, which I thought was pretty good going.
Yeah.
And I think it was Funky Monkey. So obviously this year it was like a rope up to the bars. And of course, because everyone's feet are soaking wet, the rope became just completely sodden, caked in mud. So by the time you got up to the monkey bar, made it almost impossible to grip onto it. So when I eventually first failed it, I was just hanging there. I was like, I'm going to use far too much energy to try to attempt going out. So that was about half 11, half 11, first penalty. And then after that, sort of some of the penalties started adding up. But I think it was about 5 miles in penalties at the end of the race. So I ran 85 and then my Strava was 90 miles in total.
Oh, that's pretty good then.
So it wasn't too bad. I know there was a few people out there, they had an ungodly amount of mileage just in penalties. So, I did okay, to be fair, on penalties.
Wow. What did you use your bands on, your carabiners on?
I used it every time, every single lap. I used it on, it was just the barbed wire crawl through the sort of muddy trenches.
Right.
Just to me, that was like the equivalent of mud mile. Just unnecessarily just getting caked in swampy mud and just, it was kind of, I kept forgetting to put gloves on. And it was kind of like rock sharpie, like really sharp rocks that kept cutting into my hands. So I was like, I'll just save myself and just go on to the next one. So yeah, I used it. I can't remember what it was called, but it was just a simple through the sort of trenches and barbed wire. and I just found it kind of draining and annoying, just getting covered in that mud and scratching my hands. So yeah, I used it on that every single lap.
I was the same at Europe's toughest mudder this year. I used it on mud mile every time because it was so cloggy and deep, and you know. And then when you go back to the finish line, you were opening your food up with like really filthy hands, and I was like, no, I didn't want none of that. No.
Yeah, well, I was the same. I was sort of like, oh, and I think not long after that obstacle at Worlds, it was the operation. So I thought not be as wet would be a benefit, not having so like soaking wet muddy hands. So whether it would have made a difference, I don't know. But yeah, I used it on that trenches or whatever it was called. So basically the equivalent of mud mile to me.
Wow. Timing wise for laps, I mean, you almost got 2 laps in before the obstacles opened. 39 minutes lap 1, 40 minutes lap 2. Flying.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that fast. For what strangely, obviously, you're trying to tell yourself, don't go out too hot. Don't go out too hot. But I felt comfortable, and at the same time, I was like, it'd be good to get obviously a few laps in before things start opening up. Before all the obstacles open up, and you're really tired. But yeah, weirdly, it didn't feel like I was going that fast, but I just sort of felt comfortable, so I just carried on. Yeah.
Wow. Did you realise when you went out that first lap, 39 minutes, that's close to like the fastest lap in that? Was you aware of that? Did you see the leaders in front of you?
No, I didn't pay any attention to that at all. I knew I was sort of near the front of the park in a sense, but I didn't really focus on that. I wasn't it's the sprint lap. I wasn't interested in that at all. So I saw a couple of guys just flying at us like, one of them I reckon is going to die, and I'm pretty sure I saw him a few laps later struggling. So yeah. But yeah, it didn't feel like I was going out that fast at all, or I just felt comfortable, so I just carried on for that first few laps.
Wow. When you go back, are you going back to Florida? Are you going back to Florida for the next
definitely.
one?
Yeah, I definitely want to go back. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Are we setting a bigger target? Is
100 miles.
100 miles. Straight up.
I'm getting it. So I'm hitting that 100 miles. I'm convinced that if I wasn't dealing with that cramp this year, and obviously had a bit more training under my belt, I would have hit 100 miles this year.
So what's the plans to get to that point then? Is it longer ultra runs? Is it heats? Is it?
I would say probably everything. I was dealing with an injury last year, and everything kind of went wrong. So this year I was trying to train a bit smarter, but I didn't get much ultra training in at all. I just raced 4 ultras: Nuclear Oblivion, 2 Tough Mudder Infinities, and Europe's Toughest Mudder. And then in between Europe's and now, I was just doing steady mileage each week, and I was sort of not really doing too many ultras. So if this is what I was managing on that, with only doing the 4 ultras, I fully believe if I do more ultras, literally train for this, then I've got it in the bag to get 100 miles.
So what about Yorkshire Infinity followed by Yorkshire ETM this year? Because that would be an amazing test.
Didn't even realise. So because I've not really checked much of the dates next year. I've just sort of quickly glanced at them. So Yorkshire Infinity is when?
August. I'm going to say August, is it? I think is it because they're the same dates. It's the Infinity and the ETM, because ETM's in Yorkshire this year. So
right.
It's going to be probably Europe's toughest mudder we've seen due to the elevation game. We all know Yorkshire is the hilliest. If they send us up to the top of the hill, it could be some low mileage at ETM compared to previous years. I think maybe throwing an Infinity in the morning would be excellent training for taking you to that 100-miler in next November.
Yeah, it could be, but would it stop me from, getting a result at ETM?
Well, that is the key, isn't it? Because it's what we're talking about, isn't it?
It'd be great prep, but, at the same time, it'd be nice to actually try and go for a podium again at Europe's.
Yeah. Was you you won the Europe's second?
No, third. I got third. Michael Schott, who came second at Worlds this year, he won it. So
that's right. Yeah,
he was looking amazing. He was just at another level.
Yeah. It looked really, really. But he was another one that wasn't necessarily in the running mid table. It's WTM is one of these races that everything seems to happen in that last 3 hours.
Yeah, it was weird, and as a lot of them say, the race doesn't start till like midnight, and it's so true, because you sort of saw the same sort of phase, and then all of a sudden things just started going all different and changing, and you're sort of seeing different phases. So Yeah, I think he even had like a 2 hour nap. He went back out and he still just looked so strong. So if he didn't even have that long a nap, he probably could have taken the whole thing.
Yeah, his times were phenomenal. I did look at them earlier on. I've actually got them on here. I mean, he ran a 38-minute first lap, but then he was just really, really consistent at running just over an hour. You know, I think his slowest lap was 1 hour 21 at 80 miles.
Yeah, he passed me a couple of times, and I was speaking to him, and I was just like, you've got this, and I really thought he was going to win it. He just looked so comfortable and strong.
Yeah, I mean, a 3 hour 16 pit stop, and he still managed to.
Was that how long one of his pits was?
Yeah, so on 17. Yeah, so that would be 85 miles into it, a 3 hour pit stop. Yeah,
he could have easily gone. God, an hour, 2-3 laps in there.
What did Austin? Austin didn't have a long pit stop at all. He was just consistently running. So
yeah,
the pit threw it away from him. The sleep.
He lost it from going to a nap because he got an award at the end at the awards dinner. Sleepyhead. That was the award. So that was obviously why. So
yeah, absolutely crazy. So next year and everything else, absolutely fantastic. Love to see you out next year, and we'll catch up at ETM ourselves and have a chat there. What's the plan between now and then? Where are we heading next?
I think I'm actually going to try a couple of high rocks next. So Manchester and Glasgow in March, and then OCR wise, I'm still not quite sure when the next race is, but definitely focusing on these ultras, and going to be definitely hitting Europe's, whether we do the Infinity first and then Europe's. But now I think the goal firmly focuses on like next year, World Toughest Matter next year. That is like, I've now got like a proper sort of benchmark to sort of work towards rather than just sort of winging it and seeing how the year goes. So a couple of high rocks is to start the year and then just take it as it comes, I think.
Oh, fun. I like that attitude. Just whatever comes my way, I will take it.
Well, I live in the Highlands, so everything's far away. So, even going down to England, it's a fair trek. So I try not to commit to any too much straight away in case injuries happen or something goes wrong. So at least this way I can just sort of go, right, I'll have it in the back of my mind, train towards it. But if something comes up, I've not paid for it. I've not wasted any money. So, I have a sort of eye on certain targets, but I don't sort of pay for it basically. But I think one thing that I'll be paying for early and getting set up early is when World Toughest Matter next year.
Awesome, fantastic. As I say to everyone, Grant, you're free to have a shout out to whoever you want to say thank you to before I let you shoot off to the Highlands and get up some hill training.
Well, like I did in my post, probably just the parents, Eileen and Brian Thompson, because they helped me get out there because the boiler packed in 3 days before, so I was stressing out with no heating. So they helped me make sure I had helped make sure I had plenty of money, or if I was struggling and if I was short out there. The boss, Brian Cameron, because at 2 days' notice, I told him, by the way, I've got a race. And he's like, where? I was like, America. And he was like, go for it, get out there, go and do it. So he was all the more encouraging, just literally giving me time off straight away. And then probably all the boys, there's probably too many to mention, but Kevin Calder and his crew, because they helped me and let me tag along with them in this journey. So I wasn't by myself, and I had help and friends to get me around America. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Grant. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you very much.
So there you go. I hope you enjoyed listening to that. It was a pleasure speaking to them all. I can't say I've spoken to so many athletes who are so excited about WTM, and I was so excited as well. Florida next year. So hopefully we can maybe get over there. Could tie in a bit of a holiday with it. Who knows? Let's see what happens. So I said I'd mention it, I've got a bit of an Easter egg. So one athlete I haven't got on here, and I know a lot of you are wanting to listen to him, and that is Mr. James Burton. So I am going to record with him. We're going to record 15, 20 minutes, maybe even longer, you never know. But it's going to go direct to our Patreon, okay? So it will be on our Patreon channel. It won't be on our podcast channel, but it will be on our Patreon channel, and you can listen to that. So it's going to be on there for about a month. Doesn't mean you got to pay for it either. We're going to try something new. We have got a free part of the Patreon as well. So we're just going to pop this onto free Patreons just to see what happens. It'll be on there for about between 2 weeks and a month, and then you can listen to it on the podcasts. But yeah, me, James Burton, what happened to his race? Because we all want to know. It was up there, top 3 for a long, long time. Find out by heading on to our Patreon. We'll be on there hopefully by Monday. As always, guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget, if you want to become a patron, join the Patreon train. If not, just give us a follow. Leave us a review, something like that. And thank you for listening. You take care, you stay safe, and we will see you soon. Bye.